Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's news, we're going to talk about the slippery slope and history.
Luana Bish, our news reporter from the Fast News, is going to interview some people to talk about it.
I chose 4 themes out of it.
So Dred Scott was an enslaved person who fought for his freedom. And after his case reached the U.S. Supreme Court, they ruled that he's not entitled to his freedom because he's an African American, and so that he's not a U.S. citizen. And what do you think? Even it was a failure. How do you think this decision affected the whole slave trade at that time?
So I think we can kind of look at this case from 2 different perspectives. So one, it's really going to inflame the tension between the North and the South because effectively allowing Dred Scott, to be brought into this territory, a lot of people in the North saw this as a violation of the Missouri Compromise, while the South is arguing that Dred Scott is property and therefore should be you should have the right to bring your enslaved person anywhere in the territories, regardless of if it's above the parallel line or not. So it kind of violates on that front. So as far as the slave trade, I think it's really more of the question of inflaming the slave question that's going on in Congress. What are we going to do with the new territories? Now, I think the second big thing about the Dred Scott decision, and maybe even more significantly, is the decision that Dred Scott, whether he's free or enslaved, would never be a citizen. And that's kind of really the big decision of that, is now for the first time people are saying, all right, we really are second-class citizens regardless of if we are a free or an enslaved Black person.
So Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a popular anti-slavery novel that's called Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yeah.
She inspired many to join anti-slavery movement, and at this time, women didn't have to say as much as they can do at the moment, so they were not allowed to express their opinions. Why do you think she had such a huge influence on people, even if she was a woman?
So I think this kind of is a good reflection of the growing abolition movement in the North. And so women might not have traditional political power at this time, having access to the vote, access to political office, but they kind of use other ways throughout kind of our early American history to advocate for change. And I think that Harriet Beecher Stowe writing a novel is a really good example of that, kind of going through popular media, popular literature, to kind of have political persuasion in that way. Now, I think Harriet Beecher Stowe, she's a white woman, and so I think that's going to help her a lot in getting support of other, white abolitionists and even people, kind of outside that organization to start questioning the system of slavery a little bit more. And so I think that kind of her status as a middle upper class white woman in the North is really going to benefit her and the popularity of her book.
Good, thank you.
So, my first question is about the presidential election of Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
And it was in 1860, and he often expressed moral opposition to slavery in public or private. And a quote he said was, "I'm naturally anti-slavery. If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. I can't remember when I didn't so think and feel." Do you think his strong opinion showed people that slavery is wrong?
I think his strong opinion probably helped to convince some people who were not necessarily slave owners, but maybe people who weren't really sure how they felt about slavery, or maybe, kind of had always thought it was wrong, but maybe not that big a deal, or that there wasn't anything that needed to be done about it. And I think hearing a president who was respected say that probably helped to unite some people who were kind of just more like quiet and in the middle on the subject, sort of helped to unite them to, together to form more momentum behind, the drive to end slavery.
And then my second question is, do you think we could say Abraham Lincoln ended slavery in America officially?
I don't know that you can say. I mean, he ended it. Certainly, if there's anybody to be credited with an ending to the buying and selling of people, which was what was happening. Yes. Do I think that the vestiges of slavery were also wiped away. No, I mean, there's just a different type of suppression, oppression that sort of came into play. But I think it was a huge, enormous step, because it went from saying that slaves weren't people to them at least knowing that in the eyes of the government they were no longer property, they were people. So I think it was really a remarkable thing. It didn't just automatically make everything better, though.
So the Dred Scott decision,
Mhm.
even if it was a failure, how do you think this decision affected slave trade at that time?
It made us think. The fact that he was a slave and then he was free and he thought he could be a citizen, it makes all Americans think, well, what if? What if all free slaves suddenly become citizens? Because if they're not slaves, then what are they? Are they actual people? Do they count as a full citizen of the United States? And if they do they have all the rights of all other citizens? As a country, I don't know if we're ready for that. I don't know if we're ready for having a freed slave be counted as a citizen of America. And so I'm not surprised by the court's decision to rule against him, but it makes me think as times change, that there will be a time where a free man who was a slave will be considered a citizen of the United States. And if that happens, then what's next? There's a lot of slaves in the South, which is a problem that they've created for themselves. And if all of those slaves suddenly become free, where are they going to go and what are they going to do? And are they going to be citizens? So I think at the time, Dred Scott was like, oh, of course he lost. But now I think back and I'm like, wow, that was a bigger decision than I thought at the time, So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm.
And then the presidential election of Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Do you think his strong opinions show people that slavery was wrong?
Yeah, I think, I saw one of the debates with him and Douglas. It was funny because he was so tall and Douglas was so short, so they looked really funny on stage together. But, it seemed to me that Lincoln had a better understanding of the problem of slavery, and whereas Douglas just wanted to give it to the states and let the states decide, Lincoln understood it as a national problem and a problem too big for just states to decide. And we saw that with Kansas, Nebraska. It was impossible for a state to decide. They started fighting and killing each other. And so I did vote for Lincoln, and I voted for Lincoln because I thought that he had a better understanding of the future of slavery and how it was supposed to be in America, which I think is leading toward not being in America, which it scares me, because what is the South going to do if they don't have slaves with their economy? And I think it's something that they realize they are not going to survive without the slaves. And that means that one side here is saying we must have no slaves, one side here is saying we have to have slaves, and Lincoln is kind of in the middle. And so I don't know what he's going to do.
And do you think we could say Abraham Lincoln ended slavery in America officially?
Well, I think that's going to be his goal. But like I said when we talked about Dred Scott, what all white people, North or South, slave owning or not slave owning, are worried. What are you going to do with such a large population of African slaves that suddenly become free? Where are they going to go? What jobs are they going to have? How are they going to eat? And that's thousands of people that will suddenly be just released onto the nation. And that worries everyone I talk to. All the people I know are worried about that possibility. So freeing the slaves, I don't think is so popular right now, but I think Lincoln will find a way. I think he'll find a way to do it. So I have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And these were the news from today. I hope you liked it and you learned something new, because for me it was very interesting to talk with people about it who were passionate about history and hear about different opinions about the slippery slope. I hope you enjoyed it and have a nice day. See you soon.